Let's go, baby. Talking NFL draft with you like the old days. I love it. Let's pull it up right now. Let's get right to it. Let's look at the draft order as it stands today. This is from tankathon.com. If the NFL draft were happening this weekend, the New England Patriots would be picking number 1 overall. As you guys can see, there are 4 teams that are 1 and 5, the Cleveland Browns, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Carolina Panthers as well. But the strength of schedule, as you can see on the right, that is the tiebreaker there. So that's how we got to this order here. So any of those teams, I think, are in contention, certainly for the number 1 overall pick. We got 2 teams that have buys that are sitting here at 1 and 4, the Los Angeles Rams and the Tennessee Titans at number 5 and number 6. And then we have a bunch of teams that are 7 through 12. We can talk about, we'll just talk about the top 12 today. I was going to say top 10, but we might as well make it all the 2 and 4 teams. So the New York Jets, with their loss to the Buffalo Bills, now they're at 2 and 4. They're at number 7. The Cincinnati Bengals at number 8. The New Orleans Saints at number 9. Arizona Cardinals at 10. Las Vegas Raiders 11. And the New York Giants at 12. So, John, I just kind of want to throw it to you, man. I think the best way to do this is when you look at that list of teams that are within the top 12, what are the ones that you look at and go, okay, when the season's over, they're probably not picking, let's say, top 8, because we want to talk about bad teams here. So let's say, are there any of those teams that you look at on that list and you go, all right, they're going to be better than that record. They're not going to be picking in the top 5, top 8, something like that.
Well, let's look at these first 6, maybe, for these 1-win teams. Mm-hmm. Like, there's 6 1-win teams at this point, and then maybe we move to the 2 and 4s. It's a lot harder with the 2 and 4s because there are so many different stories there,
right?
That we can touch on pretty quickly, I think. But there's really are kind of separate categories, in my opinion. I think all of these 1-win teams, I mean, Jacksonville, perhaps their upcoming schedule is pretty brutal, and they seem like they're in disarray. Talent-wise, you'd say they're probably the most likely out of the first 4, maybe the 1 and 5 teams, to kind of crawl out of that position, at least get outside the top 5, maybe, with especially the incentive they probably have to win, keep their jobs. That probably leads them to maybe looking, closer to the 8 to 12 range if they're going to end up here, which I think they'll still be in that range. But I think they're probably not going to finish in the top 5. The Patriots, the Browns, the way they're going, the Panthers, the Rams, they all have a pretty good chance. The Panthers, the Browns, the Patriots, let's just say, I think they all have a pretty good chance to end up in this range. The Rams are the one, to me, that I think they've been really competitive at the comeback win over the 49ers. Mm-hmm. I think they're way better than this. They've got the Raiders coming up after their bye week here. They get a little bit healthier, getting Cooper Kupp back. Puka Nacua, I think, will return at some point. So I do think that team, as they get healthier, will actually be sort of a force and work themselves back into the picture. Their upcoming schedule, not that tough. I mean, I think the Vikings game, that's a Thursday night game on a short week after they play the Raiders. That's going to be an interesting one. But if they can get past those guys, I think they can actually beat Seattle. I think they match up pretty well with them. The Dolphins are wilting, the Patriots after that. So the Saints down there a little bit further. I think the Eagles are far from what people hoped they would be before the season. So I actually think they can go on a little run here coming out of their bye week and get back into contention. The rest of these 1-win teams, I think, are all destined to be picking somewhere in the top 10, probably even in the top 8. Maybe Jacksonville can get out of there, but I don't know that I see it just with the disarray that they're in.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Looking at these teams that are picking in the top 6, so New England, Cleveland, Jacksonville, Carolina, the Rams, and the Tennessee Titans there, the Rams, to me, are the team that's the odd team out. Like, they are competitive. They have a really good head coach. They have a great quarterback. They're going through a lot of injuries right now. You mentioned they get a little bit healthier. I don't think if the Rams are picking in the top 8, it's going to be like 8. Right? I think this is much more likely to be a team that is picking outside of the top 10. I think they're going to be too competitive. They have already played teams really tight, despite playing a lot of young guys on the defensive line and missing a lot of players on the offensive line and just offensive pass catchers overall. They'll figure it out. I think they'll string some wins together, and they're going to be competitive down the season. So I don't expect the Rams to be here when it's all said and done. Jacksonville, I don't think the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be a top 5 draft team when it's all said and done. There's just kind of like you mentioned, there's too much talent on this team, and I think they're in for a disappointing season no matter what. You're starting 1 and 5, obviously that's really bad, and it feels like they might be going through a coaching change at some point in time through the season unless things get drastically better. But I think that they'll probably be picking outside of the top 5 as well. I do have some faith in Tennessee, that Tennessee will be somewhat competitive, but
really?
Yeah, I mean, I still think that this could be a somewhat good group. They ran the ball better this past week, which I liked. the passing game is still definitely like in disarray, right? To use your word of what you were talking about with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not giving Calvin Ridley a target until week 8 this past week, and just everything looking all over the place still with Will Levis. I think that Levis.
That's what I worry about with them. Like, where do they win? You know, like, is the O line good enough to win the way they want to win? We know the quarterback's not there yet. Like, they can't get the ball to their best playmakers. They can't rush the passer.
They ran the ball better this past week, and I think if they sort of lean more just into that, like, hey, Levis is not going to be the savior for us, and I think that we really need to dial it back with him. We need to run the ball a little bit better, because that game was competitive to the end, and in fact, like, it was pretty close with the Indianapolis Colts. Now, really, one of the big differentiating factors was simply the fact that Joe Flacco and the experience that he had the one big-time throw late in the fourth quarter, which converted a first down, which was able to salt the game away, and that's really what did it for him. The Titans were right there, and I think they can be a competitive team. I look at them and I go, maybe they're not destined for a top 5 pick. Maybe it's a top 8 overall, but I don't know. For some reason, maybe I'm dumb. I still have faith that the Titans can play a little bit better football. It's hard to believe that about the Patriots. It's hard to believe that about the Cleveland Browns. It's hard to believe that about the Carolina Panthers. Like, these are 3 bad football teams that I don't know how much better they're going to be able to get this year. Cleveland's the one where it's just like, come on, man. Like, how is it this bad? The offensive line specifically, everybody wants to talk about Deshaun Watson. Deshaun hasn't been good. But, John, the offensive line, specifically with them going through a lot of the injuries, not having Wyatt Teller out there, not having Jack Conklin out there, I mean, Ethan Post getting beat up. This is an offensive line that went from one of the best in the league, or at least we talked about them as one of the best in the league over the last 2 to 3 years. In our system, the only team that is grading worse on the offensive line than the Cleveland Browns right now is the New England Patriots. So they've got wholesale issues on the offensive side of the ball that go well beyond Deshaun Watson, and it's crazy to look at a team that I think on paper has a lot of talent that I just have so little faith in because of those reasons. So to me, I think the Rams are probably the most likely out of there. Jacksonville would probably be number 2 on that power ranking. Then I'm still intrigued by the Titans. The other 3, they're destined for a top 5 pick when it comes to April. But what about the teams?
A couple quick notes just on what you said.
Yeah.
Browns, completely agree. The protection issues they have, plus the player issues, it's sort of a double. Like, they have less talent because of the injuries. Some of their guys who are good, they missed the window. Like, they're not as good anymore. Just straight up, Joel Bitonio is just not as good, even if he's still solid. Like, he's not what he was, and so they missed the window kind of in the prime of a lot of those guys. And then injuries catch up with you. That's just the nature of the league. They had a window, and Watson wasn't good enough the last 2 years, and obviously him still not being good enough even when healthy has been a huge factor this season as well. He doesn't work well within the protection, and then the rules for the protection too. I think coaching deserves some blame too for what's gone on in Cleveland, and so it's kind of that when it's the disaster is that widespread. You're right. I don't see it getting better. Tennessee, interesting. Just to note on them, just so people are kind of aware, the Titans actually spent more money in total guarantees in free agency than any other team in the NFL. So we'll have to talk about another time maybe how those free agent signings are working out for them. But I thought the whole thing about the firing Vrabel was that they wanted to do a long-term rebuild. They may be in position to do that anyway, even after adding those players, because they are a one-win team. But we'll see if you're right and they can crawl out of the cellar here. I think of the next group, the 2 and 4 teams, it gets like really vastly different. Here are the Jets, who just traded for Devontae Adams today. Like, they have kind of all this incentive to continue to win, right? This is a team that absolutely feels like they're going to be back into the playoff picture. And I don't think they'll be a top 10 drafting team. So they're easy for me to get out of there because I think they've played okay. I think they're just a solid team. I don't think the Adams trade is going to put them in Super Bowl contention, which is where they want to be. But I also look at their schedule. It's not that hard coming up. I think this is a team that, to me, pretty clearly is going to get at least into like the 500 type of schedule range or type of record range. The Bengals have played better than their record. I think the Giants at 12 down there have played better than their record so far this season. We'll see where injuries leave them, but I think there's talent in those 2 spots to get more into the teens at least in the draft order. The rest of them, like the Raiders, I think will be the team that's most likely to fall into the top 5 as the Rams come out of there maybe. And then I think the other one that's interesting, I'm not sure where I fall on the Cardinals just yet, but I think the Saints are another one that could be they've lost 4 in a row. Rattler gives them some energy, I think. But I mean, here they are playing on a short week. They're pretty banged up against a really good Broncos defense. If they lose that game, like, where does it go from here? Does Rattler go the rest of the way? Like, I just think they might be a team that ends up falling down into the top five, which, considering where their cap's at, is sort of a very Titans-esque situation, except the Saints overall cap in future years is way worse than the Titans situation is, even as much as the Titans have spent recently. So that's one I would say like could be a sneaky top five, sneaky pick to pick in the top five.
Yeah, I mean, New Orleans was a team that, when you do those like bold call articles for every single team going into the season, I like to stay positive with it because you want to be able to look at the best in teams. But for New Orleans, the bold call that I had is that this team's picking in the top five in April. And you start off the season, you play really, really well against the Carolina Panthers, you play great against the Dallas Cowboys as well. And you go, okay, I guess the Saints are a lot better than what we thought, and things were going well. Certainly the offensive line. They've dealt with injuries, and there's reasons why they're on a 4-game skid. I understand that. But unfortunately, the record is what it is. You played 2 really bad teams, and you got wins, and then things started to unravel for you. Now your quarterback's missing a couple of weeks, and you've already lost 4 games in a row. So for the New Orleans Saints, I don't really know, like, even if Derek Carr comes back, even if they get a couple of the guys injured along the offensive line that get to come back, I don't know if this team's just going to snap back into, okay, they're going to look exactly the way that they did against the Panthers and their defense, which we know about the Panthers now, against every other team in the league. So I think that New Orleans is certainly a sneaky team to get into that top 5. Las Vegas, probably the most likely, but I do agree with you. New Orleans is there. It seems harsh. I'm kind of losing faith with the Arizona Cardinals. Now I'm not saying that they can't play good football, but it is too up and down. It's way too much of a roller coaster, week to week, drive to drive. It's just there's too much of a roller coaster there. They have the ability to play extremely well some weeks, but they're just not stringing it together as much as they need to. And so we knew that it was going to be a multi-year for the Arizona Cardinals. You feel like 2025 is really the year for them to become legitimate contenders. And there were signs in the early weeks of this season that you went, oh, maybe they're ahead of their schedule here. Maybe they're ahead of schedule when it comes to becoming one of those better teams in the NFL, maybe competing for a playoff spot. But it just feels like it's way too up and down at this point, where I don't think they're going to be picking within the top 5. But if you told me the Cardinals have a top 10 pick again this year, I wouldn't be shocked. So that's sort of my thoughts there. I agree. The Jets are going to be picking outside the top 10. The Bengals are going to be picking outside the top 10. Giants.
I'm like the Giants defender left, I feel like.
You
Whereas
are.
I
Confidently said, you were like, oh, yeah, they're better than their record. Yeah. They're all good. We're moving on.
I think they should have. I think they should have beat Washington. If you look at the context of that game, we don't have to get into it now. And I think they were better than the Cowboys. I mean, I know part of this is just like Daniel Jones just didn't hit open deep balls, and he probably won't in the future too. Like, that's a huge issue with them. But I just think they get Neighbors back. The defense is playing pretty well. The defensive line is a real force, and I think that drives winning a lot in today's NFL. And Jones is bad, but he's not so bad, I think, that like he's going to just make it impossible for them to win with, like maybe the Titans quarterback situation, for example. So I don't know that they'll make the playoffs, but I think they could pretty easily be 3-3 or 4-2 right now, and they've played more at that level of a team rather than like a top 8 drafting team.
Yeah. This will be music to Giants fans' ears because Connor and I on the NFL Stock Exchange show, we were talking about.
You guys said they're trash.
Well, we were talking about like DEFCON ratings for like if your team needs a like where your team is basically, and like if you need a quarterback super badly. And we had that when we got to the Giants, we obviously said that like, okay, like this is a DEFCON 1 situation. Like they need a quarterback badly. They're going to be drafting one. But then we sort of talked about their overall situation. And for me, if the Giants are picking in the top 5, I think that the season has gone so poorly to where like they're moving on from Brian Daboll. They might be moving on from Joe Shane. Like it might just be hey, we're cleaning house here. It has not worked out. And the Giants fans have kind of gotten on me. They're like, why are you saying that we're going to fire Brian Daboll? And I don't think they should fire Brian Daboll. I just don't like if the season doesn't go the way you want it to. Yes, they're 2-4, and you could be like, whoa, they're only picking 12th in the draft. Well, that's because of strength of schedule. So if they continue to lose games, they're obviously going to be picking in the top 10. Maybe I'm way off there because I think that Brian Daboll is a good coach, and I would love for the Giants not to fire him. I just don't know. Do they get another chance? Does the regime of Joe Shane and Brian Dable, do they get another chance to really make a decision on a quarterback? I know a lot of people are going to say like, oh, they didn't really have a decision on Daniel Jones, which could be the case, but the league's impatient. It's an impatient league, and so I never know. You defending the Giants at least is giving something else to that conversation, because I would love for the Giants to keep Brian Dable. I just wonder, if you're picking in the top 5, did your year go poorly enough to where you go, okay, everything here is just not working, we're moving on? I don't know.
I should have looked this up before the show. Maybe you can look it up. I'm trying to think of what your record would typically be if you're picking in the top 5 to 10 range, like how bad that would have been based on like maybe last season or so. But I just see the Giants as more of like a 7-win type of team. Like, rather, if we're talking about them picking top 5, which you mentioned there, I would imagine you're talking about them winning like maybe 2 more games the rest of the way, being that kind of a team, 2 or 3 more games.
Right.
And I think they're going to do better than that. I don't think they're going to be above 500 probably at this point. They probably dug themselves too deep of a hole. But there's winnable. I mean, this Eagles game coming up is an interesting one, right? The Eagles have really been struggling. I think most people would say Philly's better than the Giants for sure, but they haven't really been playing to their talent for a long time now. Then you've got the Steelers. That way that defense is playing against the offense that the Steelers have. I think the Commanders will be tough, but the Panthers in the bye, and it's not an easy schedule to close necessarily, but like I said, I think they can get to 6 or 7 wins. Where would that put them based on last year's draft order?
I'm trying to look it up here. You would think that this is easier to look up than it is.
Like the records that they were last year in that order, yeah,
right?
Because they don't usually have. I feel like you normally like a 4 or 5 win teams, like in the top, in the 5 to 8 range, like where you're like 5 to 6 win maybe would be in like the top 8 if you extend out that far, but maybe that's all they have is this. I think they're going to finish 7-10, so I think they'll win 5 the rest of the way. So maybe we aren't that far apart on them. Just looking at their schedule, I think they're more likely to finish 7-10, that 8-9 type of team, than they are like a 5-win team. For example.
So the Panthers obviously picked number 1. They only won 2 games. They went 2-15. Washington's next. They went 4-13. The Patriots, same thing. They're 4-13. Yeah. Then you got the Cardinals, 4-13 as well. The Chargers were 5, and they went 5-12. So now you're getting into the 5. So the team picking number 5 overall still only won 5 games last year.
And did the Giants win 5 last year? 5 or 6 maybe last year?
Giants won 6.
6 last year. So yeah, I think they're a little better than last year. It with neighbors now. If they're healthy, I think they can get to 7 or 8 this season. The NFC's better too, and especially their division. Well, their division's more competitive. I don't know if it's better or not yet. We'll find out, I guess. Although I guess last year was disappointing for a lot of the season too. But I don't think they can. I don't think it's a lock they get blank. But like 2 losses to the Commanders, 2 losses to the Eagles, 2 losses to the Cowboys this season. I don't know that I see it as a biggest gap between those teams as has been in the past, and that's what gives me some hope the Giants can get to 7 or 8 wins.
All right, last thing I want to talk about before we get to a quick quarterback conversation, and then we'll get into some rookie review stuff in a little bit. Is there a team outside of the top 12 that you identify as like, yeah, I think this team is picking in the top, let's say 8. Doesn't have to be top 5, but is there a team outside of the top 12 of the ones that we highlighted that you go, yeah, I could definitely see this team picking within those top 8 teams?
I think if you're just looking like the easier select choices for this, I think Miami just like at 13, even like just their messaging on 2 is so vague, right? Like we expect them to come back at some point this season. Well, that doesn't sound close at all. Like, and they're just drawing completely dead with what they have now. They might be the worst team in the league with their current group right now. They just eked out one over the Patriots, but I think they're that bad. So they're an easy pick to be like, if Tua just doesn't come back this season, and so I mean they've already suffered a bunch of other injuries, then they could easily be a team that finishes in the top 5 to 8. Mm-hmm. I think Denver's the other one, just because I think their quarterback situation and their offense is really rough. Their defense is good, but that's hard to sustain that every single week. We already saw the Chargers kind of have some success, so we'll see if that's enough to keep them maybe outside the top 5. But I could see them getting into the top 10. And then if you're just going like, who's the longest, the long shots, you get down here into the teams in the 20s. That could end up in that range. Like Pittsburgh right now is at 27th in this order, and their offense is just objectively bad. I think defensively they're good, but they've had some injuries now. They really need their pass rush to be like the best in the NFL, and their D line is the best in the NFL, I think, but their pass rush itself is more like a bottom of the top 10, bottom of the top 10, keep in mind there, but that type of range. And I think that's fine, but just given the state of this team and how they're built, it needs to be the top end of that. And I don't think the coaching is giving them is maximizing their best group right now with the way that they're deploying players, how low the blitz rate is, lots of different things. And so I don't even see them leaning into their strength as much as they should. And so they would be the team to me. I don't think they're going to pick in the top 5 to 10, but if there's a chance for anybody in the 20s to fall that far, I think it would be probably Pittsburgh that falls out of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Miami's not playing this week. They're on a bye. They were on the bye for week 6, and their strength of schedule is the lowest in the NFL right now. And yet they are 2-3. If they would be 2-4, if you would tie them with those teams that are picking 7 through 12, they would be picking at 7. So they would already be in the top 8. So I think that's obviously an easy projection to put them in the top 8. I agree. It's a massive struggle for the Miami Dolphins. I think they could be a top 5 team in the draft order when it's all said and done. And then the sneaky one that you didn't mention is Dallas. Like I think things are bad in Dallas. I think that this is a bad football team. I really do. So Dallas is one of those teams that I expected a little bit of a regression from them this year, from the double-digit win seasons that we've seen over the past couple of years with them. But I didn't think that it would look as bad as I feel like it does right now. And to me, it feels like Dallas is sort of like hanging on a thread of being a good team. And I think that there's a potential that it unravels for them. And I think that they could be in the top 8 when it's all said and done. I do. I kind of think that about the...
Have you seen the Cowboys schedule?
Is it brutal?
You ready for this? Let's close with this before we get to the rookie reviews.
Okay.
Bye week this week, 49ers, at Atlanta, who's playing better and better, Philly, Texans, at the Commanders, the way they're playing.
Yikes.
Short week playing the Giants, which, I mean, I think the Giants were pretty equal with them when they just played. The Bengals, who I think we both think is going to play better over the second half of the season. They have the first. Then the Panthers, then the Bucks, the Eagles, and the Commanders to finish the season. I mean, you're spot on, Trevor. This could be a 6-win team.
I think this is a 6-win team. I think this is a 6-win team.
It's possible. Yeah. 6 or 7 is not. Yeah, it's a good call.
Yeah, I think this is. Yeah, I think 6 wins. Obviously, they're picking in the top.
Look at the O-line. Look at the way the secondary's playing right now. The injuries they've had up front. It's very possible. Yeah, that's a good call.